Have you ever felt like your brain is just stuck on high alert, constantly scanning for danger even when you logically know you're perfectly safe? Well, let's get into the science of why that happens. I mean, if this quote right here sounds familiar to you, that feeling of being totally wired, but also completely tired, always looking for the next thing to go wrong, you should know you are so not alone. It's a really common and frankly deeply uncomfortable place to be. And here's the most important thing to get right away. This isn't just in your head. It's not just a feeling. It's a real, measurable, biological state that your body is in. So we're going to break down the science of why it happens, and even better, what we can actually do about it. So first up, let's put a name to this state. It's often called nervous system dysregulation, and that's really the heart of what it means to feel stuck in survival mode. Okay, the easiest way to think about your nervous system is like a car. You've got an accelerator, that's for getting you ready for action, and you've got a brake to help you slow down and recover. A dysregulated system, that's like having your foot jammed on the accelerator, or maybe slamming between the gas and the brake with no smooth, easy cruising in between. So our body has these two main systems. On one side, you have the sympathetic system. That's your accelerator, your fight or flight. It's designed for short, powerful bursts to handle real danger. On the other side is the parasympathetic system. That's your brake, your rest and digest state. That's our calm, default mode. Dysregulation is what happens when that accelerator gets stuck in the on position, long after any real threat is passed. And this imbalance shows up all over the place in our lives. Physically, it might feel like a racing heart or just being exhausted all the time. Emotionally, it's that classic feeling of overwhelm or constant anxiety. And behaviorally, it can look like the inability to just sit still and relax, or maybe wanting to avoid people altogether. Do any of these sound familiar to you? Okay, so that's what's happening in our bodies. But the really big question is, why? Why does this happen? Well, it turns out the answer seems to be all about how our individual brains are wired to handle one very specific thing: uncertainty. This brings us to a key scientific concept: intolerance of uncertainty, or IU for short. Now, I know that definition sounds a bit academic, but the idea is actually super simple. It's just a measure of how much our brain hates not knowing what's going to happen next. For some people, not knowing is kind of exciting, right? It's an adventure. But for others, it is pure agony. And this is the absolute game changer right here. For a brain with high intolerance of uncertainty, not knowing isn't just uncomfortable, it's processed as danger. So that what if you're thinking about, like, what did they mean by that text message? It can literally trigger the exact same internal alarm system as a real physical threat. In neuroscience, they sometimes call this a prediction error. See, the anxious brain desperately wants to predict the future so it can feel safe. So when reality doesn't match its predictions, even in really tiny ways, that surprise, that unexpected event, is what rings all the internal alarm bells. So what do those alarm bells actually look like inside the brain? Let's take a peek at the neural wiring behind all this. And this isn't just some abstract theory. Scientists can actually see this happening. This brain scan comes from a major scientific review, and it shows the specific brain regions that are out of balance. The red areas are hyperactive. They're working way overtime. The blue areas are underactive. Now, I know this looks complicated, so let's make it really simple. Here is the best possible way to think about this. Your brain's threat detection system has two main parts. First, you've got the limbic system, your emotional, reactive brain. Think of it like a super sensitive smoke detector. It's incredibly fast and it screams fire at the tiniest puff of smoke. Then you have the prefrontal cortex, your rational, thinking brain. This is like the fire chief who calmly walks in, assesses the whole situation, and says, "Everybody relax, it's just some burnt toast." So in a brain with a high intolerance for uncertainty, that smoke detector is just way, way too sensitive. These brain regions, like the amygdala and the insula, are constantly firing off alarms. Meanwhile, the fire chief, the prefrontal cortex, is kind of sluggish. It doesn't step in quickly enough to offer some much-needed context and calm things down. And the result? You end up feeling this constant, low-level sense of threat, even when you're in a perfectly safe environment. Okay, so this system is out of whack. The smoke detector is overactive, and the fire chief is underactive. But here is the really good news. This isn't permanent. We can actively work to bring them back into balance. The whole strategy really comes down to two things. First, we need to find ways to manually turn down the volume on that screaming smoke detector. And second, we need to do things that help wake up and strengthen our inner fire chief. You know, the fastest way to calm that smoke detector is to go through your body, specifically through your breath. When you take a slow, deep breath and you make the exhale just a little bit longer than the inhale, that sends a direct signal to your brainstem that says, hey, we're safe. It's like a biological override switch. This one is just a fantastic technique because it does both things at once. It calms the smoke detector and wakes up the fire chief. By forcing your attention onto your immediate senses, what you can see, touch, and hear right now, you're pulling your brain out of those future what-if spirals and planting it firmly in the present moment where you're actually okay. It literally activates your prefrontal cortex, your fire chief, by making it observe and name things. And of course, there are other powerful tools in the toolbox. Gentle movement helps your body burn off all those stress hormones. Quality sleep, it's completely non-negotiable for brain repair. Connecting with a safe person actually helps co-regulate your nervous system with theirs. And simply creating predictable, quiet moments in your day tells your brain that it's okay. It doesn't have to be on all the time. So look, the goal isn't to get rid of all stress. That's just impossible. It's about building your capacity to handle it. And it really does start with these small, consistent actions that teach your nervous system, moment by moment, that it is safe to finally power down from survival mode. Which leaves us with one simple question to think about.